So let's move back towards, we're going to get the chemical works would have stood near Stockport Junction. That is still there, but it's a different version of a chemical works. And Stockport Junction house would have stood in, you can see the grounds of where sort of a mansion house would have stood, but obviously the canal went miles into Stockport. I think that's everything. Well, there's another extension down at, it's Clapham Street Chemical Works, and there's a small branch. It's got a swing bridge, and that's where I'll end when I'm walking down. Won't include the motorways, and the very tricky section is where the Medlock crosses. It actually goes under it, but there's no signs of an aqueduct, and the Sport City football ground and all the rest of it has now wiped it all out, and I'm sure it'll be very high tech how the water flows underneath, so it's not really worth filming just yet until I can probably do a full video just about how the motorway crosses, etc. So that'll be included next time. But there's 3 separate canal branches that are included now. So we can see that the road goes under, but we'll see across the Stowe Street Aqueduct in central Manchester, England obviously. It's built in 1798 by Benjamin Outram on the Ashton Canal. It's a grade 2 listed building. It's built on a skew of 45 degrees across Stowe Street. It's believed to be the first major aqueduct of its kind in Great Britain. It's the oldest still in use today. The aqueduct was constructed to cross Shooter's Brook. It is built of stone with large towers, retaining walls of coursed masonry. It's 7.4 metres wide, 24 feet, with triangular buttresses. The brook was culverted, which it originally crossed over a brook in a field. As the Manchester grew, about 1805, Stowe Street was built over the brook in a culvert. So the canal is about 4.6 metres wide and 1.5 or 4.5 metres, that's 4 foot 9 inches deep. The arch is 7.6 metres, that's its square span, so it's actually taller in the centre, but that's as high as a vehicle could be to pass through. Okay, I explained that quite well off the cuff. It's actually 10.5 metres. The skew span rising 2.75 metres above road level. So usually where a canal or later railways crossed the road or vice versa, the road would be diverted to cross at right angles. It had not always been acceptable, but attempts to build masonry arch bridges at an angle or skew of greater than about 15 degrees had always proved unsatisfactory. The method up to that time had been to build the voussoir arch with the stone coursework parallel to the abutments, so you just attach each arch, so the arch would only be, basically straight, and then you'd attach each one across the top. This transmitted the load outward from the crown in a straight line to the foundations, parallel to the faces of the arch. So the forces get forced downwards rather than sideways. If you build it wrong, it's going to leak or fall apart basically. So there's a lot of engineering goes into these. You look at it and just think it's just a stone bridge, but it isn't. It literally isn't. It could, if it was 46 degrees, it'd fall over. That's what they're saying. It has to be just dead on, straight lines to the foundations. If a skew was attempted, it usually threw the lines of force outside the abutments. You can't see them. We didn't understand physics back then, but we do now. It would just lead to a weakness in the structure, causing it probably to fall down or breach very easily in high water in a flood. A hole would bust in it very easy and a lot of it would just start falling away. William Chapman had partially solved the problem in 1787, so it's that long ago, the engineering. excuse me. Yeah, the building bridges for the Kildare Canal, the first being the Finlay Bridge near Nass. The Kildare was part of the Grand Canal Company. William Jessup had been the engineer. Jessup would no doubt have discussed with Outram, his partner, and he experimented with the idea on the Rochdale Canal. Examples of this are at Garrells Lane and March Barn Bridge. I filmed March Barn Road Bridge. It goes across at a 45-degree skew. I did say it goes across at an angle, but now there's a mill in the way, a modern storage warehouse. I didn't actually say it was a 45-degree skew at the time. I probably didn't know that, but I did say it does go across at an angle and the other end has been chopped away. So there we go. The Rochdale Canal has two. Though it is possible that they were built later than this one, the Store Street. The method used was to build a timber falsework parallel to the proposed arches. Planks were laid on the falsework parallel to the abutments, and then the position of the courses at the crown were marked out. Then those across the remainder of the arch were put in place. Although the aqueduct still exists and is structurally sound, years of neglect led to water leakage through the joints. The spiral construction can no longer be seen. The surface of the base has been rendered, but they used to have spiral feet on the bottom basically, so it's off the ground, but now they've filled in the base with a concrete filler just to make it more structurally sound. Vibration from the road could probably topple it. It's, you know what I mean, it's strong, but it's got flaws in its design. The aqueduct still exists and is structurally sound. That is the main thing though. Later railway engineers improved on the system, producing what became known as the helicoidal or helicidal constructions. It became like the norm or normal skew bridge buildings in England and Britain. An exact solution to the problem was determined in the form of the French orthogonal design. However, this was complicated and expensive to build, so there's not many of them, or many that lasted. There's some on the Castlefield Basin where there's railways there. There's some steel and iron will do. So I'll explain a bit more about Ashton Canal, because we'll get the Stockport link. There used to be 4 important connections. The Fairbottom branch is a branch of Hollingwood, which is a branch. So it's like a tree. They branch out and they get thinner and smaller as they go, but they go to further and further places inland from the main canals. So Beatbank branch canal, that would have been part of the Stockport branch canal from Reddish to Beatbank in Denton, but this was abandoned before completion. Many of the canal locks are now listed buildings canal received an Act of Parliament in 1792 and was built to supply coal from Oldham and Ashton-under-Lyne to Manchester. The first section between Ancoats Lane and to Ashton-under-Lyne and Hollingwood was completed in 1796, followed by lines to Heaton Norris and Fairbottom. As I've just said, 1797 they were all being completed and built. It's in this era in time is called Canal Mania. The Bridgewater Canal was such a massive success and worked so well, everybody then just said, right, we need canals to connect everywhere up, so they started to build them. Canal Mania, Bury Bolton, Manchester Canal Company, Salford Canal, a lot of them are in the north, but you can actually go along the canals to the Thames in London. It's a long, complicated journey, but it's possible. You could go right over the Pennines from Rochdale Canal, join up to the Calder Navigation, all the way down south, and literally join up with the Thames. Someone said, what, Camden Lock is not actually a lock. I'll do the history of all that another time. I do know the history of our maritime past, but you can't fit it all in. It's literally hours and hours of footage you could make about the history of the British canals. So apart from being linked to the Rochdale Canal, the Ashton was actually opened as an isolated waterway originally, so all the other branches weren't quite ready. Peak Forest Canal, Aqueduct that goes over the Tame, for example, wasn't quite ready. So it was all there, ready, but it didn't link over the river, which would have been a nightmare, because I bet they would have had to unload and then reload on the other side what gets over somehow. Even just drag the horses through the river, I suppose, all sorts of ideas until it was ready. So people would have been getting angry. Investors. Benjamin Outram was retained to complete the final sections, including the Piccadilly Basin that we walked through, which was different when he finished to what it is today. Included the unique Store Street Aqueduct. He's responsible for that. So Benjamin Outram and William Jessup are two of the chief engineers of all these. Thomas Telford as well, and of course Mr. Bridgewater. Lost track of my notes. It's only because I wear glasses, by the way. I'm walking along and I'm reading it all. I have different microphones these days, that's all. And I like to film the things that I'm talking about rather than film myself. I think there's enough people filming themselves and just talking about things. The idea of walking along like this and narrating is that you get to see it. Because the things that I'm talking about is what I want people to see, not just me saying, and this is that, and this is that, and just filming myself, basically. I've always said that. I'm adamant that that is the way I will film it, and that I always will, as though I am watching it just like you at home. It's a different way of filming, I do know that, but this is the way it is done. And now and again I make mistakes. I spin the camera around just to prove that I'm there, but when I'm concentrating and I'm reading, I'm walking, I've got one eye on the camera, one eye on the microphone, making sure that all the levels are right. It's a lot more complicated than it looked. And then I've got editing. So like that area then, I just stopped talking as I talked about editing, because I needed to edit something, but it was continuous. There was no gap. You didn't hear a gap, but there was a gap. But I still recorded the whole thing, if that makes sense. The idea is to try and cut out wind and traffic noise, etc., because I've had videos and films ruined by it. So all the if you do it properly, you record your sound and your video separate. That's as technical as I get. That's as technical as I'm ever going to be. But I do have some experience. I'm not just sat off walking. I used to be a DJ, I don't know if I've mentioned that. Just a bedroom DJ. I DJ'd at some of the big clubs in Manchester. So I understand technical equipment and how recording something and then broadcasting it later on can give you a completely different look. It's like if you record something onto a tape, it can sound different, etc., etc. So There's a bit more skill involved than just, you know, doing it. So it's a hobby, and I find it very interesting finding out the history. So that's about as much about me as I would like to talk about. Let's carry on walking. Following nationalisation, 1947-1948, traffic on the canals did not revive, so it was nationalised just to keep it running because there was not massive profits in it, but it was still essential, like a lot of things, so it's subsidised. That's the best way of putting it. As I say, they were all still incomplete. That's the best way of putting it. As I say, they were all still incomplete because of the Canal Mania, Fair Bottom in 1797. That's what I was on about. So it's quite obvious. The canal also branched off in this direction once. And Benjamin Outram, he was involved with everything along the canal. The Bridgewater Canal was the original, but the extension of the Rochdale to the Bridgewater was not built until 1800. The cottage AD 1863. And all I want now is to finish on the gas cylinders. So although the Huddersfield Narrow Canal was open as far as Wool Road by 1798, we finally filled some gas cylinders. Neither it nor the Peak Forest Canal were complete because it was 10 years before they would actually connect to Yorkshire and the East Coast, and the Rochdale Canal didn't yet connect them down towards the Irwell navigation or the Castlefield Basin. So still got a long ways to go. So nighttime looms. There's the end. There's the old house.